Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. I'm so glad you joined me today. For months now, there has been speculation that a new and undiscovered serial killer is stalking New England. 12 bodies in 3 months, body after body, have turned up, but the police are insistent each of the cases is a single standalone case. People in the area, true crime watchers, they're not convinced, and many are drawing parallels to the now infamous story of Rex Heuermann, the Long Island serial killer, who was also said for many, many years to not exist. Now we know he does. Is there another new unknown serial killer stalking New England? Today we're going to go over the cases that some believe are linked together, and you can judge for yourself. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. It helps so much. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. Paige Fannon was a hairdresser at Cactus Salon and Day Spa in West Islip, New York. She was vibrant and adventurous. She loved being outdoors and she loved traveling. And it is on a very usual day for Paige, a day when she decided to go out walking, that she vanished. It was a chilly day in March, the 4th to be specific. Paige headed out towards the Norwalk River to spend some time alone. This is something that Paige did often. She loved nature and she liked some quiet time by herself. But on March 4th, Paige never returned from her walk. She was reported missing, and her friends, family, and co-workers all began to search for Paige. She was last seen in Wilton, Connecticut on March 5th, so she'd traveled some distance in the short time she was missing. Sadly, Paige was found quickly, but not in the way anyone had hoped for. On March 6th, scuba divers were sent into the river to search. Under this bridge, in some quickly moving waters, Paige's body was recovered by Norwalk, Connecticut police divers in the Norwalk River, which is near Main Avenue and Grist Mill Road. Her clothing and personal items were found along the riverbank at Shanks Island, suggesting that she entered or was placed in the river nearby. Her body was discovered after heavy rainfall and swollen and fast-flowing water, complicating recovery. There were no visible signs of trauma on Paige's remains. The medical examiner has yet to publicly release the cause of death. Investigators emphasized this case remained active and encouraged anyone with information to come forward. The police are asking that if you have any information about Paige Fannon, you call 203-854-3111 or leave an anonymous tip at www.norwalkpd.com. Sadly, this is just the first mysterious and unsolved death we're going to talk about today, and you may begin to see a pattern. Shockingly, on the very same day that Paige Fannon's body was found, March 6th, a human skull was found in a wooded area off Route 3 near Plymouth, Massachusetts, by a hunter who initially thought it belonged to an animal. Authorities later confirmed that the bones found were part of a human skull missing its jaw and nasal bones. No further identifying data, such as age, sex, or cause of death, were publicly released at the time. And since this discovery, there has been almost nothing new released. It's now months later, and there is no new information. We know that DNA testing can take weeks or months or even years if there's no matching samples in the system's law enforcement uses. So it's not terribly surprising that there hasn't been an identification on a partial human skull 4 months after its discovery, but this find has only served to fuel the theories that someone is murdering people in New England. On March 19th, 2025, 58-year-old Suzanne Warser went missing from her home. That same day, her torso was discovered in a suitcase near the Colonel Ledyard Cemetery. This murder appears to have been solved. 68-year-old Daniel Koffel, Suzanne's roommate, has been arrested and charged with murder, tampering with physical evidence, and improper disposal of a body. Daniel Koffel admitted to hitting Suzanne in the head with a baseball bat, keeping her body in their shared apartment for a week and a half, and then dismembering her. This appears to be a murder over a drug debt. Daniel Koffel then died in custody on May 9th, 2025. His death has been ruled as natural cause. I mean, I think if you're still doing crack at 70 years old, you're living on borrowed time. But it's important that we talk about the cases that have been ruled out, as well as the cases we still have questions on. This murder, as it relates to the New England serial killer theories, is known as the cemetery murder. And it appears that it has been solved. Days later, on March 20th, 2025, the New Haven Police Department announced on its Twitter page that human remains had been found on the 100 block of Rock Creek Road in New Haven, Connecticut. A resident reported finding human remains while clearing brush in a wooded area behind the house. The remains were in an advanced state of decay. They were taken to the medical examiner's office for identification, and there, the body was identified as 59-year-old Denise Liry. She had been missing for months and was last seen on September 29th, 2024. Denise is originally from Connecticut. She raised her kids in Atlanta, but had recently moved back to Connecticut to help take care of her mother and father. A few nights before Denise disappeared, she called her son Joshua to tell him that she was going out. And then she said, "Turn my location off on your phone." Joshua thought this was strange, but he did as his mother asked him to do. A few minutes later, he peeked out the window to see who was picking up his mother, but he didn't catch a good look. Denise came home that night, safe and sound, but then, a few days later, she vanished. It appears as though she left through her bedroom window at some point that night. No one knows if she left willingly or if she was taken. Denise's son has cancer and is doing all he can to locate his mother. She's tall, 5'11", and weighs around 165 pounds. People thought surely she'd be located and brought back to her family, but months went by and that didn't happen. And then Denise's body was found in the brush on the side of the road. This story is obviously very new, and Denise's cause of death has not been released, if it is even known at this time. Not 2 weeks later, there was another terrible discovery. On April 2nd, 2025, neighbors of 56-year-old Michelle Romano watched as her home in Warwick, Rhode Island was swarmed with cops. As you can see, they were digging through the backyard and collecting items from the house. But here's the thing. Michelle Romano had gone missing months ago, over the summer of 2024. The cops stayed at Michelle's house in Warwick all day long, and then they released information as to what they were doing there. Michelle Romano's body had been found in Foster, nearly 30 miles from her Warwick neighborhood. Her cause of death has not been released either, and we still do not have a lot of information on her disappearance and death. The next week, on April 9th, in Killingly, the Connecticut State Police were informed that human remains had been discovered in a remote location. The only statement released on this case and this body is as follows. This investigation is in the early stages, remains active and ongoing, and there is no information at this time suggesting any connection to similar remains discoveries actively under investigation by CSP or any other Connecticut law enforcement agency. So that sounds like a very strong denial, but the public is not convinced. Then, on April 10th, in Framingham, Massachusetts, there was an unidentified body found, and there has been almost no information released on this case. So, as you can imagine, it's driving the conspiracy theories. On April 22nd, around 8 a.m., a call came into the Springfield Police Department. There was an unresponsive woman lying near the 1500 block of Hall of Fame Avenue. Police arrived at that scene, but there was nothing that could be done. The woman was dead. She had been murdered. We do not yet know who she is or how she died, although it is likely that authorities have that information. Days later, on April 25th, 2025, 45-year-old Meredith was riding her bike in Springfield, Massachusetts, in the area of Riverfront Park when she was murdered. She was found unresponsive on the bike path by another park goer. Megan was rushed to the hospital where she later died. This murder really sent people over the edge. This was the 5th body discovered in weeks. All of the victims were attractive women, most of them over 40 years old, and they were being taken from locations they were very familiar with. And it's about this point in time when authorities start to get very insistent that these deaths are not linked. Too insistent for some people. When Megan's body was found, Hamden District Attorney Anthony Golini said, "I'm always a proponent of people being aware of their surroundings, no matter where you live or where you are. But with the recent incidents, the recent murders this week, I'm not in a position to say. But there's no reason to believe there's a need for heightened concern for safety measures in this region." This statement really bothered some people. Authorities were now openly telling the public that despite 5 murders in a very short period of time, there was no cause for concern. A Facebook group very quickly began to grow. It's called the New England SK Group and currently has 32,000 members. And that's up from just 17,000 when I checked it a couple of weeks ago. Groups following this story online also have a hashtag. As you're probably aware, the Long Island serial killer Rex Heuermann is known as LISK. Well, this new supposed serial killer is known as NESK. New England serial killer. Members in some of these social media groups find the cops' insistence that these cases are not linked, cannot be linked, disturbing. I've read a lot of comments that say things like, why are the police so upset and angry about there being possible connections, about people talking about those possible connections? It seems like their energy is better spent trying to solve the cases and not worrying about whether or not they're connected. That's kind of the general sentiment in a lot of the comments. Some people are saying things like, if this ends up being a serial killer, then so be it. It just seems weird that they're so sure it isn't. As the conversation online continued and more people became aware that there are rumors of a serial killer in the area, another woman was murdered.
Nasha Mendez, 35-year-old from the city, suffered numerous knife wounds and her death was ruled a homicide. Detectives were able to quickly establish a suspect, Edwin Arroyo Roman, 55 of New Haven. They were found to, they had a relationship. He was arrested last night. After confessing to the homicide. Mr. Roman has been charged with murder, tampering with evidence. He is currently being arraigned, and I was told that he was arraigned and his bond of $3 million was kept. We're continuing to further investigate, so I'm unable to go into further details, but we will be giving more information at a press conference next week with the family of Miss Mendez. Yes, surveillance cameras helped, but the team quickly put the whole story together, and we're able to not only get video around the cemetery, but video at the suspect's residence. There's a whole bunch of factors in this that led to it, but it definitely, I want to thank Detective Blaisdell and Sergeant Canning and Detective Moran and their team who put this together very quickly.
As you heard, 55 Edwin Arroyo Roman has been arrested for the murder of Nasha Mendez. So this leaves 2 of the murders with arrested suspects. I think it's important to note that, to be truthful, and to not fuel the fires of conspiracy. It might turn out that there is some sort of a conspiracy here, but I think it's important that we talk about the arrests as well. I also think it's important to note that there are several unidentified bodies associated with this case as well. To date, 12 bodies or sets of human remains have been discovered across Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, mainly in remote woods or waterways. The victims have ranged between 35 and 59 years old. This is a somewhat broad age range, but there are no young victims at all. No kids, and no males. And again, all of the women are conventionally attractive. Bike paths and riverbanks seem to be involved in a lot of the murders. And again, there's something else they have in common. Very little information released to the public. Now, this is understandable. Cops not releasing a lot of information on a murder does not mean there's a conspiracy at play. Sometimes it's necessary for authorities to withhold information, and sometimes it just takes time to gather a lot of information. School got out and people were beginning to enjoy their summer breaks. And then, just as it had so many times before in recent months, news broke of another murder. On Sunday, June 1st, the body of 21-year-old Adriana Suazo was found in a wooded area in the Norfolk district in Milton, Massachusetts. This body marked the 13th body found in just several months. Now, of course, Adriana is younger than the youngest victim, Paige Fannon, who was 35. At around 11:45 a.m. on that Sunday, a passerby near a home on 143 Central Avenue in Milton found Adriana lying in some bushes. There were no obvious signs of trauma, which has become a hallmark of this group of cases. The bodies are not beaten or shot or stabbed. Adriana grew up in Boston, but had been spending time in Milton. Her family members aren't sure why. One of Adriana's sisters said she'd last spoken to Adriana the week before her body was found. But with now 13 bodies, all of women, all found in parks or wooded areas in New England, turning up murdered, a serious portion of the local public is convinced that there is an active serial killer stalking New England. I spent some time watching interviews with true crime figures that have weighed in on this developing situation. Jane Borowski, if you remember, she is the only surviving victim of the Connecticut River Valley killer in the 1980s. She took to social media to urge people to be vigilant and to be supportive of the police officers. Criminologist James Allen Fox explained in one interview that humans crave patterns and links, and that might be why people are trying to connect these cases. In a region like New England, where many people live different types of lifestyles, Fox said that fear can become overwhelming. And one way that people deal with fear is to overanalyze. He said that might be what's happening here with the theories of the New England serial killer. I personally haven't seen enough evidence to make me believe there's a serial killer operating in New England. Does that mean it's not happening? Of course not. I just don't know that these cases seem similar enough. And the other thing that I always take into consideration is the victim's risk factors. We do see some very obvious risk factors in some of these victims' lives: drug use, secret meetings with unknown people the victims don't want others to know about, and these factors often make murders more difficult to solve. It's important to discuss risk factors when we're talking about victims because our lifestyles very much play a role in our risk of becoming a homicide victim a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. There's always a chance that you can be that 1 in 10,000 totally random stranger on stranger victim. Let's not spend too much time thinking about that because it's always upsetting. Law enforcement in all of the states involved maintain that there is no information at this time suggesting any connection among the cases, and cops have also really emphasized that each death is being treated independently due to a lack of forensic linkage. Pink ribbons and police tape, forensic teams combing riverbanks and woods, autopsy reports, and missing person cold case files have dominated the headlines. Still, the human need for closure pushed families and armchair detectives alike into collective storytelling, kind of a one narrative that fits them all. So let's go over very briefly a couple of the theories. The first theory is, of course, that this is a single serial killer. Proponents point to timeline density, geographical spread, and female victims all found in remote places. But the lack of consistent modus operandi, varying ages, and various states of decomposition challenge this theory. The second theory is these are just multiple unrelated deaths. Some could be accidents, unattended deaths, or extended missing persons. Law enforcement stresses that no forensic or behavioral links have been found so far. There's also a weak pattern, but a lot of social amplification. Experts argue that clustering and social media drive patterns have pushed a narrative where none exists, which has elevated coincidence into crisis. The tension between fact and fear still plays out. Families want closure. Authorities continue their forensic efforts, and theories are swirling online. But in the wooded groves and riversides across the region, silence is still holding its secrets. It doesn't sound like the talk of the New England serial killer is dying down anytime soon.
I'm Bob Ward. Lately, there's been a lot of talk about the possibility that an active serial killer might be on the loose in New England. You've probably seen the posts in your news feeds, or you've come across coverage in mainstream media. There's no question New England serial killer talk has grown into something of a phenomenon, but we're asking if there's anything to it. In the beginning of March, online sleuths were the first to pick up on a dark trend. They noticed bodies turning up all across southern New England. And as each body was discovered, membership in the private Facebook discussion group New England NESK soared. Here, members openly discussed the possibility that some or all of the bodies recently discovered throughout Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts might be the work of a serial killer. The speculation growing so loud, law enforcement responded. In Framingham, where a body was found on April 10th, the DA said, information gathered at the scene does not indicate foul play. In Springfield, where a 45-year-old woman's body was found in late April, the DA said, unverified claims can compromise active investigations. At this time, there is no indication that these incidents are connected to each other, or are they part of a larger public safety threat. We have law enforcement saying there is no serial killer, yet people are still thinking that there might be a serial killer out there.
They want to believe, and social media backs it up.
David Richard is a professor of public relations at Emerson College. He's not surprised that concern over an unconfirmed potential New England serial killer is spreading like wildfire.
We almost kind of want there to be something like this because, in a way, the news and social media have merged together and it's become infotainment for us.
New England has long had a fascination with serial killers. In the 1960s, it was the Boston Strangler case. In the early 90s, the still unsolved New Bedford highway murders attracted national attention.
The FBI gives the definition of a serial killer when there are 3 or more in a period of time. By that definition, if these 3 are related, then that's what we're looking at.
More recently, law enforcement focused on a string of unsolved murders of women from the Maine South area of Worcester. But what about now? Why are people focusing on these New England cases?
It's exciting for them, unfortunately. I think it's exciting for them to think that there is, because it's something that is that water cooler talk, right? The things that we used to do standing, at the coffee machine at work, now we're doing that in Facebook groups.
Angel Wood hosts the podcast Crime of the Truest Kind. She's skeptical about the possibility of a current New England serial killer, and she hopes the discussion may soon turn towards the victims and their families in other unresolved cases.
I feel like it's good that people are looking at these cases because these cases need more attention. But I'm always thinking about the families and how this is going to impact them.
My sources in the law enforcement community tell me these latest cases in New England are isolated and are most likely not the work of a serial killer. But as we've seen, interest in these cases remains high and people will always be watching. I'm Bob Ward for your local station, Boston 25 News.
That's where things stand right now in August of 2025. Whether or not an unknown serial killer is stalking New England remains to be seen. If you go back through true crime show episodes talking about the disappearances of the Gilgo Beach victims, you can see with your own eyes people excusing the disappearances away, saying they weren't related, that these were standalone murders. And now we know that Rex Heuermann, the Long Island serial killer, was most definitely murdering women in the area. We know that those cases, once thought to be unrelated, are linked in the most horrific ways imaginable. Only time will tell if we've got a second NESK case on our hands, or if the next breaking news story will change the hashtag NESK forever. I'm really anxious to hear your thoughts on this case. I can't wait to talk with you in the comments. I sure appreciate you joining me today on Dark Hearts. This is my podcast. It's on Apple and Spotify. I post brand new episodes every Monday and Wednesday. Don't forget about our fundraiser. We are perpetually raising money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that has never been tested. We're trying to help solve some cold crimes. We're getting close to our first goal, and I think within the next couple of months, we will be voting on a case to donate to. I'm so excited. A special thank you, as always, to my patrons, and I remind you that if you join my Patreon, you will get some content that you cannot see or hear anywhere else. I hope you're doing well, my friends. Talking to you is always the highlight of my week. Stay safe and be kind to each other, and I'll see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.